Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. We will start shortly. Well, hi everyone, Chloe here from the Great British Entrepreneur Awards. Welcome to our 2021 Finalist Workshop announcements in partnership with Funding Options. Thank you for joining us today. This has been a record-breaking year for the Great British Entrepreneur Awards with over 4,800 applications received. And we're really excited today to be announcing our finalists for the Scale Up Entrepreneur of the Year. Before we do, I'm joined today by Avin, founder of Housekeep, and Avin was awarded our Scale Up Entrepreneur of the Year category in London in 2019, and he'll be telling us today about his entrepreneurial journey and how winning GBEA has affected and impacted his business. If you would like to ask any questions, you can pop this in the Q&A function and we'll try to answer these later on in the session. And with that, I'll pass over to Simon Curtin of Funding Options, who will be hosting today's session. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you very much indeed. Just for those of you who don't know what Funding Options does, so we are Europe's leading platform for SME or for business finance, and we have helped more than 10,000 businesses gain access to vital funding well in excess of £500 million. So with that, I'll move on to Avin, who's probably got a far more interesting story to tell than certainly I do today. So Avin, well done again on winning the Scale Up Entrepreneur of the Year award for 2019. So if you don't mind, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. An intro to yourself, and maybe you could tell the audience a little bit about your business.
Sure thing. So, hey everyone. I will tell you a bit about my personal story, and then perhaps we can delve into Housekeep. My background is born and raised in Manchester. I'm a Man United fan. There's only one football club in that city, much as you may be misled otherwise. And only one red team in the Northwest as well, just to clarify. And I was one of those kids who, always was doing business money-making schemes. I'm not sure I knew the difference really. So I was quite seriously one of those kids. I'd go shopping with my mum in the supermarket and say things like, "Mum, special tomato, tin tomatoes are on offer. They last 2 years. I reckon over 2 years we're going to consume 30 tins of tin tomatoes, and therefore we should buy them, saving however many pence." Honestly, that was how my brain worked, which is a bit weird. And I kind of grew up in a family where everybody ran a business of some sort or another. And I just kind of assumed that what people did when they grew up and got proper jobs was they were kind of business people. My wife's family also ethnically Indian, but brought up here. Her family's all doctors. And I think she just assumed that everyone grows up to be a doctor. And I thought everyone just goes into business. Then went across to university, so I went to Oxford, did the normal entrepreneur thing, which is I ran a load of parties, had loads of cash in my pocket, that was fun, and then moved to London and kind of wanted to learn as much about business as possible before I went and did it myself. And in those days, people didn't really leave university and start businesses. Richard Branson was the only one really. It wasn't very long ago, it wasn't that long ago, 15, 20 years ago, but the entrepreneurial world was a different place then. So I did a year in investment banking, doing the job that the Goldman Sachs junior bankers are complaining about at the moment. And then 3 years in strategy consulting, so combination strategy, ops and commercial due diligence work for private equity houses. And then moved into early stage private equity and venture capital investing. So I was part of a team of 8 and managed about £500,000 investing down in young growing companies across the UK. Got to 29 and a half, I wasn't married at the time, didn't have a kid at the time, so my circumstances were a little bit different, and thought I either kind of go now or probably don't go and probably don't ever start my own thing. And probably somewhat unusually started without a specific problem to solve, without a personal pain point, without a personal interest point really. And said, what are the interesting things that I've seen in my investing days that I think I can sort of extrapolate from and build from? So I sat down and did a piece of market research, looking at interesting markets, looking for the right dynamics, and kind of settled on this sort of hypothesis around, let's look for a big existing market for something, a fragmented supply base, and scope to do it better, ideally with technology. And I was thinking about what Pret did for sandwich shops, big market sandwich shops. Pret did it better, grew and scaled. And an interesting side note to that is it took Pret 4 years to open the second store. and obviously have many, many, many stores today, or what Pets Home did for pet stores, what Just Eat did for takeout, what Uber did for taxi drivers. And the global home services market is worth $1 trillion. It's large. It's worth 50 billion in the UK. It's very fragmented, and there are loads of mom and pop shop companies that make good money, but none of them can scale that well. And that's where the sort of technology piece comes in. And so got started, for me, it was kind of, should I waste my time doing this or not? So really wanted to understand in order, what are the biggest barriers to success, and try to fix them. So it was, can you deliver good cleaning? Can you get cleaners? So I did a lot of the cleaning myself in the early days, trying to figure out the model. Yeah. And solve things on repeat. Housekeep today is does tens of millions of turnover, growing pretty quickly, raised a bit of funding along the way, done 1 million cleans, marketing in the UK, blah blah blah. It's done pretty well. And so the next phase for us is about how big can we make this thing? How many territories can we operate in? How many services can we operate in before we sort of exit somewhere along the line in maybe another 5 or 10 years.
Very good, very good. I could have sworn after your initial part of the story, you were going to tell us you were the world's foremost producer of tinned tomatoes or something like that.
There is a thing going around Twitter about tomatoes, but I won't go into that. It's something else.
Fair play. You touched just a tiny bit there. You touched on your funding journey. Was that particularly complex? Is there anything that you'd like to share around your funding journey?
Yeah, perhaps a couple of things to say. I'll try to say things that are interesting that perhaps the audience hasn't necessarily heard elsewhere. And I think one thing, I know this sounds a bit academic, but one question I really strongly encourage everybody to think about is like, why and what are you trying to achieve here? So in my role as a VC private equity investor, effectively I had a very, very small stake in, the handful of companies that we'd invest in every year. And I explicitly did not want to end up on the front page of TechCrunch with 10% of my business. That wasn't what I was after. And I'm not saying, and I know it sounds a bit critical, me phrasing like that, but that's not what I mean. I wanted to own and build a business in my own time, in my own space, under my own steam. Now, it turned out I need some money to do that, or money could get me somewhere faster. But if you want to build a business over a decade or 2 decades, I really question if you need capital. And I think people sort of start with, I must need capital, but actually, the people that should give you capital is paying customers who pay you enough money that you can make money from the service you sell. That's kind of how business works. And if you can't do that and you need a lot of capital, probably only a couple of reasons that you might need something different. One is there's some sort of very intense upfront cost that is really, really required. There rarely is, but sometimes there is. You're building a power plant, and until you build it, you can't sell any energy. Or there's some sort of competitive pressure. And I think people believe one of those two things is true all the time, but I don't think it is true very often. So start with that why. And then I suppose the second thing I'd say that's perhaps a bit different now, raising money for, the people I hung out with were VCs, angels, and entrepreneurs. So raising money wasn't particularly a challenge, I suppose, or certainly easier than most people would find it. I think I thought at the time that people invested in me because they thought I was smart and they liked me and they thought it was a big market opportunity. And some of those things might be true, but they invested in me. And when I look at companies to invest in now, I still do bits of angel investing along the way. I look for something quite specific, which is, does this person understand their market way better than anybody else? And even if their business model turns out to be rubbish, are they going to have the best chance of success in it? And there are 2 ways you can do that. You can either work your socks off, which is kind of what I did, or you can be an industry expert. You could have been in the cleaning industry for 40 years and know everything about the model, blah, 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 blah. In cleaning, there aren't many people like that. But you've kind of got one of those 2 options. I think what people were surprised about when I was having funding conversations with them was how much I understood already. They would ask a question, I'd say, I've actually already answered that question. But the question that you really want to ask is this question that's four levels along, because that's what I'm worried about today. And they backed my ability to figure out a lot more things in the future. In other words, I'd figured out 10 things. I'm going to need to figure out another 100,000 things to make this a success. And it's that sort of ability to decision make with a high degree of uncertainty that people are looking for. I don't think people talk about it in those words, but that's who gets funded. And the last thing I was going to say, this is slightly more practical tip, is if you've got some good news along the line in your funding journey, keep it in your back pocket. There's no need to tell everybody your good news. Keep your good news if you've got some bad news. If you just had a terrific June, don't tell anyone. You might have a bad July. Then you can say, hey, actually we had July's going to be a bit offish, but June's going to be amazing. It was amazing because, blah, blah, blah. If you have a great July as well, then you can always say you've had a great June, mid-July, and you can save your great July in case you have a bad August, whatever it might be. Just bear in mind, it's a story. It's a storytelling process that you're going through.
Yeah, very good, very insightful. The government's obviously spent a lot of time focusing on startups and promoting the startup environment. Do you think they need to now turn their attention to scale-ups? So, clearly there has been a lot of startups. Do they get forgotten after a certain point? Do they need to focus explicitly on the scale-ups?
I read this question in advance, and I was tempted to say no. I don't know. I mean, of course, I'd like more free money. That would be lovely. I'd like gold chairs, and I don't know. To give a slightly less ridiculous answer, startups face many common challenges. So, you need to set up a company. That's a barrier. You need to raise a bit of capital. The government's done very well with simplifying a lot of these kind of things. And frankly, if you can't figure out how to set up a company, you can't raise capital. If you can't raise money under the SAIS scheme, then you should ask yourself whether you're going to be successful at all the other challenges that are going to come your way. By the time you get to scale-up size, the problems that I face are very different. They're quite unique to housekeeping, our market, and our business model compared to any other company in a totally different industry, in power plants or whatever I said earlier, or building a football team or whatever on earth it might be. I think it gets harder to provide targeted support as these companies become sort of the challenges that they face are quite different. Everyone has the same problem. How do I hire my first person? How does employment work? But once you've got 40, 100, if you can't, I think these businesses at some point need to be able to go under their own steam. And so absolutely, I would love it if the government gave me loads of tax breaks and put more money in my pocket and housekeep's pocket. That would be terrific. I'd love that. But I'd also like, many other things that aren't realistic. And I just feel like the life of a founder and entrepreneur is to fix stuff yourself, figure it out, make it happen. If the government want to give me some stuff along the way, I'm very happy to take it. But I don't expect it. I expect to be able to build and grow this business under myself and the team that I build around me.
Very good, very good. So my final question. So what has winning the Great British Entrepreneur Awards done for you and done for your business?
We've won a couple of things over the years with the Great British Entrepreneurs Awards. And I think there's a couple of things. One is it just helps the profile of the business, makes you more credible. Now we're a sort of B2C company, so does a consumer really care? Probably not that much. Would a corporate care? Probably a bit more. And would a corporate who you're selling to care? Big corporate probably do care. People that want to be seen to be on this sort of stage, absolutely. So I think there's that credibility externally. There's the credibility internally as well. I can sit here and say to my team time and time again, hey, I've seen this many businesses and, we're in the top blah, blah percent. But it's absolutely critical for that internal validation. And one thing I would say is it probably comes across without anyone needs to sort of think too hard. I'm one of those people that I don't really care about what we did. I care about what we're going to do. And I definitely, I wish I'd stopped a few times along the way and celebrated a few things along the way. Just written down, hey, we did this thing that was quite cool on this day. And the award something is one of those kind of things that you can celebrate as a team that can mean something to the team and give a reward to everybody else around you. Especially if you're a bit like me and you're like, cool, won that. What's next? It's a good point to stop and take stock. And of course, the other bit it gives you is you'll be able to give a little bit back along the way and say, hope you can provide a few nuggets to the guys that are listening.
Very good. Well, look, I think you've done that today. So look, really appreciate your time. You're clearly a man on a mission, and congrats again. And thanks for participating today.
Do you want me to? I'm conscious of the time, but do you want me to quickly address any of this Q&A?
Yeah, Chloe, do you want to interject at this point? I'm not sure how we're doing for time. I think we're doing quite well. So that would be great, I'm sure, for the audience.
Yeah, we've got one question in from Megan, which we can answer quickly. Was there a specific point where you realised you were now ready? Was there a specific point where you realised you were now ready to speak to someone about scaling up on a much bigger scale?
Sorry, about what on a much bigger scale?
Sorry, were you ready to speak about scaling up to a much bigger scale?
Okay. Yes. Yes. I read a tweet years ago, and I don't spend much of my life on Twitter, but it's something that's really stuck with me, and I think it's sort of broadly true. It said, for successful businesses over long periods of time, what you normally find, I don't know where this tweet came from, you spend the first year exploring, you spend 4 years executing, and then you spend another year exploring and 4 years executing, and so on and so forth. And this is probably about true for businesses that I've observed. You spend about a year trying to figure out what on earth, what is house cleaning, how does it work, blah, blah, blah. And then you either figure out something that works or you die. If you figure out something that works, you get head down. And I talk to people about this phase where housekeep sold blue widgets. We would sell you a recurring clean in London, and we would sell you nothing else. We wouldn't sell in other cities. We wouldn't sell you big cleans, small cleans, cleans with add-ons, cleans for corporate. Didn't do any of it. It was super focused, which is why we didn't need capital, because that made the business very profitable. Then we kind of got to the point where like, okay, the business is profitable, it's growing pretty quickly. Cool. What should we do now? And I described that as sort of ending the startup phase. And the startup phase is to some extent not dying. And in other words, getting to a point where you're break even, when you've got enough money in the bank where the lights can stay on without external capital. And then you're left with a sort of second question, which is quite different, which we're currently working on, which is like, how big can we make this thing? Because obviously we can sell cleaning, we can sell gardening, we can sell it in London, we can sell it in Brighton, we can ... And that was a very difficult transition, to be clear, because it was happening to me without me realizing that it was happening to me. And everything was a bit broken, nothing quite worked. We were still growing, but it slowed. I had to build out the team. That takes a long time to bear fruit, ... So in retrospect, that's what I'd say. I sort of realized that.
Fantastic. We will jump into the announcement now for the Scale Up Entrepreneur of the Year category for 2021. Great. Thank you both.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Well, that was our shortlist for the 2021 Scale Up Entrepreneur of the Year category. Thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you again to Simon and Avon for joining us and hosting the interview as well. Thank you, everyone.